Jackie, great to have you here today. And again, thank you for joining us. I know how busy you are. Maybe we could start off with just a few minutes on your own backgrounds and a little bit about 2047.
Thank you, Stan, and it's such a great honor to be here. And HITLAB has always been such an amazing platform for my founders as well as investors to get to know the new founders. And I really appreciate the introductions you guys have given me and giving our portfolios and the guidance to our portfolios. I think that Medicurial, one of our portfolio companies, cannot speaking like singing the songs about what the help HITLAB has given to him. And I want to say thank you very much for that. So anytime I'm here to help. And Health2047 is, as Dr. Stan mentioned, it's a venture arm for the American Medical Association. And we are started at the venture studio in Menlo Park and have this goal is to focus on building solutions centered on the physicians and strengthen their relationship with their patients. Since the inception in 2016, Dr. Jim Madera, the CEO of AMA, giving us a mandate is to really effectively having this meaningful and measurable healthcare transformation. And that this is what we kind of are focusing on doing in our investment, right? My husband always joke with me saying that, hey, who has that number in the name 2047? What does that mean? And really it means that by 2047, it's AMA's bicentennial birthday. So that is what we wishfully thinking that we would make a huge impact for the healthcare system. And we have, since the inception of the company, we have invested 13 companies, and currently 10 of them are active. They covered from the cybersecurity in healthcare. They covered from the phenotypes in diagnosed obesity, what is helping you to gain and lose weight. And we have covered the digital side, the data side, like Medicurial, Medicare Advantage program. And recently, just in the first quarter of 2025, we just invested into a brain health cognitive for the early dementia, the AI foundational model. So we have been pretty active and in the investment side. Now, what I'm going to say is that we have a silent investment partner. I would call them anchor investor. They will not in public allow us to put on a paper, but we can say that because it's on the cap table. That's United Health Group. So for every investment that we made at Health 2047, United Healthcare has been really amazing side by side and making investment so far.
That's a really great background. Thank you, Jackie, for that. And for the audience, if you have any questions, remember you can look up Jackie's LinkedIn. It's in the chat box, as well as mine, of course. If you've got any questions for me, feel free to ping me. Or I think, Jackie, one of the big things that we're seeing right now in this new healthcare economy is the funding has shifted dramatically. So we're seeing a number of cuts through not just Medicare, Medicaid, but also with NIH funding, et cetera. And so really the health system, even before these cuts, was teetering. And the funding now is switching in a very short period of time, literally, weeks, not months or years. And how are your startups adjusting to that? What are they doing to adjust to that? And what are some of the new and alternative funding sources that you're seeing them turn to for that?
That's a great question. And I would say this is a very turbulent period of time. And I think that we also going through because the turbulent time is one thing, and then there's a macro impact of that. And we see that, both not only from the public side, but also from private side is having this head-on wind of the unpredictability, right? And we have actually 30% of my portfolio is currently in a raise. And then I would say 40% are geared to a major raise in Q1 2026. So what we have seen is that from both the market and our portfolio has shifting things in a few ways. So if you allow me to go through these shifting here is one is that on the public side, on the market, what I have observed is that people are started obviously going to the more private funding. So the private funding, it's not just the I would say venture capitals, corporate ventures, I would say that the milestone driven funds, right? But in the same time is that they're looking at a mixed fundings using that private investment and philanthropy. For example, that I think that there is an article on Wall Street Journal talking about venture capital firms like Lux Capital. They have initiative programs such as Lux Labs, which allocating about 100 million to support early stage academic research in biotech and AI. The goal of that they set up is to fill the gap left by the declining NIH funding. And then the secondly is to blend the funding models using, so for example, the 2025 Yale Innovation Summit, where that Reed Jobs introducing funding approach to combine philanthropy and venture capital to support life science research. So that is a kind of a very interesting combination we see in the public, in the markets that the data has shifting. Now, the second part here is I would consider it's a little bit of what I consider like a internal challenge. Internal challenge is when you look at a company, you have to look at a company in a way that is just like your own cash statement, cash flow statement. You have the revenue, you have the expenses. On the revenue side, obviously for early stage, early startup, you don't have revenue. That's really your investment. So how can we increase the investment? And then the second portion is how can we manage our operating burn rate? So in the investment side, we actually in the first quarter of this year, we actually sold a company to a private equity. The purpose of that is the private equity is much better funded and they can give this company the gasoline for the growth. And we still hold a minority percentage of that, same as United. And for the purposes, we continue want to introduce our network to the company, right? But you see that the mergers and acquisition become a big piece for the companies that these are the activities that help the company to fund and growth. And the other part I would say is that for the founders is that let's look deeper of your operating costs. How can we find strategic partners and collaborations to really reduce that? What are the technology development you can be a possibility to develop in kind? And then secondly, how you control your burn rate. We have one company on the market raising capital because the market is so turbulent that the original raise has extended to be, I would say, to close around, has extended more than 6 to 9 months, right? In order to survive, they drastically cut down their burn rate by 60%. And the purpose of that is they want to extend their runway. So we needed to look deeper inside is how we can extend the runway to help that. And then lastly is that, the federal cut is one thing, but there are ways to look at revenue cycle, how you negotiate with your potential customers, how you negotiate, looking at, how we can bring in the investors, strategic investors, not only being writing you the check, but can they be your first customer to hit the big differences for every startup is, are you post revenue or are you pre-revenue? How can we demonstrate the first revenue to show up? And lastly, but I think it's also kind of a little bit long shot here is that we need to looking at the state tax incentives. For example, that recently that industry leaders in Connecticut are pushing for a state level tax incentives to retain and attract biotech firms. So that is another thing that we can look, despite the tax despite that the federal funding is reducing, how can we get that help from state as well?
Jackie, I think there's a book coming out of this conversation. You've got a lot of very good ideas here, and
Thank you.
the level of not only the breadth but also the depth of each one could be hours of discussions. And I'm sure there's a lot of startups right now that are taking notes and trying to understand how to dig into this. Are there any online resources that point to a lot of what you're building here and a lot of the the things that you're referencing here?
So generally, like for me, I'm just a voracious reader, and every night I dedicate time just go through like Wall Street Journal, right, and New York Times. This is basic stuff. But I also I'm a heavy Bloomberg user and a PitchBook user, and this is the areas that I focus on, really looking at. Hey, what are the other venture firms doing? What are the recent transactions they are doing? And my analyst basically combing through what are the key transactions in specific sector applicable to the companies we have invested. And internally at Health 2047, we also provided the market comp for our founders, i.e. that we're combing through different stages for the purposes that for us to raise one round, you're always looking at the 3 rounds ahead of you, right? Who can you potential strategic investor? Who can you be your buyer? And who can you become a part of the merger acquisition target and the partners? These are the things you have to constantly looking at it and constantly challenging yourself. Now, don't get me wrong. Most of founders I have encountered, they have very good understanding of their markets, and we are there just supporting the data and make sure that they understand that the competitive landscape has been changing very quickly.
That makes a lot of sense too. And given the fact that the funding landscape is changing so dramatically, how are folks like hospital systems and health plans and life science companies and even employers? I know you guys work with a lot of these folks and your funding partners here, and there's a lot of strategic funds that you see with large employers deploying capital as well to help digital health with their employees. What are they doing to step in and help out their startups in this time and this shift of healthcare economy works that are going on?
I would say that currently what we have observed is that from my portfolio perspective is that we have been very fortunate since we started a company. We have actually over 16%, 16%, 16 times the match for every dollar we invest. And we have some very good corporate venture as our capital partner. We have Dexicon, LabCorp, CVS Ventures, New Light PEs, and that's just named a few coming to my mind, right? And in addition to that, we also have a really good, strategic partners. We're using those technologies. Now, what are the things they have stepping into coming in from that? One is I realized that we just have to raise bridge round. And the between now and the next milestone, there is about 1 to 2 years in the current market. And I think that for the founders is that how you're going to work with your existing investors and have them to participate with you to do a bridge round before the next time you go to the market. That's a huge, huge component. And currently, I myself is negotiating about 3 bridge rounds for my portfolio. And these negotiations really come into how you entice the investors to put more money, not because they have to, but it's really how, right? And then the other part here is that what does that milestone entice you to the part that you're going to the bigger round, and what's that key differences you're setting to? And the other part here is that I think we sort of not touching upon all those hospital systems we are touching here. Don't forget there is another funding sources. It's your family offices and high net worth individuals. And family offices, particularly I like, is they are far more mission driven. So they are return driven, of course, every one of us is. But then family office is high net worth individuals. We have been getting huge success in our circle is that they are the repeated investor. And also colonization, right? So we have this investor with us invested in the very first company called Zing Health. It's a Medicare Advantage program started with 2 African American physicians outside of Chicago. And they just came to us and say that, hey, we have this idea. There are people who just not being covered underserved, and mostly the reason they're underserved is by social determinants of the health. We can help, but we need help. We need money. So we stood with them as co-founder, set up the companies, and involved this investor. And as of today, that he has already repeated invested in multiple of portfolios after he's seen the success of Zing Health. Xinhouse currently reaches 700 million revenue this year and 1.2 billion revenue next year. That was our very first company in Health 2040's portfolio. Our percentage equity position is diluted so much, but they still ask us to sit on the board for the special, for all the network and relationship we bring you. So your current existing investor relationship is hugely important. These are the relationship we have repeatedly brought into all our portfolios.
And that makes a difference. I think you guys have this holistic approach that's very startup friendly.
Yeah.
And obviously, coming in as the AMA's venture fund, you are very physician friendly. You understand the perspectives of patients and physicians so well, which is clearly what's driving a lot of your success. And looking more deeply into this funding gap that a lot of founders are running into, what guidance would you offer founders around the country who are navigating these volatile funding times and trying to figure out and navigate these new health economics and the U.S. healthcare economy, in terms of being able to focus on the funding environment, especially folks that are focused on public or preventative health initiatives? That's a lot of what's being cut. So specifically for those groups, like Birthview that just talked here as well, what guidance would you offer folks like that?
So I would say that's the same, I think, with offer every portfolio company. As a matter of fact, it's not just the public cutting the funding, right? It's really be scrappy. Look deeper into your operating expenses. How can we reduce the burn, right? And that's it's the number one rule. And then the second part is for now, because the funding is shifting to more private to fill the gap. So for private fundings, make sure you tie to the milestone. When is your major product release? What does that mean? And when you break even, when does that mean to the EBITDA? And then the other part, don't forget, is that your milestone needed to be very precise, and then what are the dollar tied to that, right? And then lastly is that rethink your funding mix, and then make sure that you communicate that story, your PR presentations in a way that is not only is a mission driven piece, but hey, these are returns. I want to demonstrate the returns. Don't forget, without the public funding, you need to demonstrate your mission and your return, the full story.
That's great. Any final thoughts, Jackie? Again, we're getting tremendous feedback on your comments on the chat box and the chat for the Zoom meeting here. Any other points that you want to impart before we sign off on this session? I think we're going to have to talk about putting out a publication on this, Jackie. But before you sign off, do you want to give anyone else any other guidance on these important elements?
So at the Health 2047, we are very much supportive of the early stage. We actually sit with people as a co-founder with our founders. And we not only provided the initial seed fundings, but we are a full service company, i.e. that we actually helping people to build companies. We plan the people in fractional CFO, CMO, helping people to look at the product, sales, launch strategies, even compliance and regulatories. And I myself, whether you like it or not, my evening job after my day job is actually moonlighting for each of my portfolio companies as their fractional CFO, strategic CFO. So these are the things that we offer, and we would love to reach out to me, and we love to take a look at your investment thesis. We are early stage, and we don't do anything with FDA approvals, but other than that, it's a Wild West land.
That's wonderful, Jackie. Fantastic. And again, don't forget to look her up. Her LinkedIn is in the chat, and you can see her there. And she is a regular member of the HITLAB community. So be sure to stay in touch with that as well. Thank you again, Jackie. Have a great rest of May and a good summer.
Thank you, Dr. Stan. Always good to see you. Thank you.
Likewise.